So the biggest thing with the newborns is that when they were going through all the things, how to co-regulate with them, obviously are pretty obvious when you're not feeding them, right? That it's warm, that we're anticipating the needs of the newborn. The biggest thing is that we're modifying the environment to decrease the demand. This is my word. These are the red. The red is my interpretation. I think every phase has a phase of co-regulation. I call the infancy phase the attunement phase of co-regulation. I believe the more regulated an adult is, the more attuned they are to their baby or to a baby. So if a baby's crying because they're wet, the attunement action is we change them. If a baby's crying because they're hungry, we feed them. Baby's crying because it's too noisy, we dim the noise. So this is the attunement phase, but only regulated humans can be attuned. And the other word that I use in the team seminar is noticing. So the noticer is an attuner, and you can attune to babies, you can attune to anybody, but babies in particular, because they cannot change the environment or the people to regulate, they need you to do that. Toddlerhood. Because toddlers are our violators, this is really where we start to label some emotions with toddlers and we model. Toddlerhood is the modeling and redirecting stage of co-regulation. Toddlerhood, I see parents doing this. My best friend used to do this with their toddlers because toddlers start to get a little bit of language now. But the toddler doesn't have the capacity to even understand that, because really the only thing that regulates a toddler is redirection. You move the toddler to something else, to somebody else, to somewhere else. So this is where choices come in. And by the way, if a toddler grows up in an environment, or you grew up in an environment, or your children grew up in an environment where there were no boundaries in toddlerhood, there were no choices in toddlerhood, so it was a very rigid or strict environment, or it was absolutely chaotic, which there was nothing, we are going to see an adult in their adulthood have a really hard time with a lot of their behavioral regulation, because this is actually where it happens. It doesn't happen on another phase. It happens here. This is where they model everything. So this is really about the caregiver's ability to model appropriate behavior, particularly in conflict times, and redirect the toddler, not have a conversation with the toddler. So how do you regulate? You redirect the child to something else, and then all of a sudden the toddler calms down. Preschool. Preschool is our boundary and incentivizing stage. Preschool, the reason the cup gets really full or the bucket gets really full is this is where people learn as preschoolers that when we do something, we get something. This is where people start to learn the relationships between humans, and we're incentivized for it. This is why stickers and stamps are so interesting at this stage, because it's exciting. We'll start to learn that for work, we get something. For doing something, we get something. And there's nothing wrong with that, because that is life. Elementary. So this is where it stabilizes out, because this is a language phase. So our elementary kids in your office, these are the kids you can talk to. These are the kids where you can start to give them feeling words. I don't want, when I'm talking to like 6, 7, 8-year-old kids, it's funny, I actually, if I do a case history with them, I ask the child to tell me how it feels. And if they don't have a language, then they show me where it feels, which is hilarious because basically what we do with adults. And then the mom often will throw in a whole bunch of words like, does it sting? Does it feel like pokey? Does it feel like hot? Trying to give, at this age, actually, you can start to give ideas so that they can start to learn words around their feeling so that they can regulate. Sometimes at this age, you might actually have your kids starting to breathe, dance, spin, run. This is tough in school, because in school, they're taught that they're to be self-regulatory on their own at this age, but they're not. So if they get a huge input of water at this age, these are going to be healthy adults. Adolescence. The big thing about adolescence, I think that I thought was interesting in here, is that they have to be you have to create opportunities. So you actually have to make them opportunities where they actually can make some decisions with a little bit of risk, but that's not going to harm them. This is where adolescence, this is where sports comes in, or their hobbies come in. They start to learn that they are going to fail and they're going to be okay. So this is actually where you learn, I can try things and I'm going to be okay, if you had a safe environment to do that in. and you really needed what was healthy, and hopefully you had in your either home environment or a coach or a family member, was a safe place to fall, which was a non-judgmental, empathetic adult that actually could work through things with you, and sometimes not even work through anything with you, but just be there for you. So that having another human around to help them through that, in smaller cases, is what they need. And to adulthood, then once they get into their 20s, they can make whatever decision that they want, because once they get to young adulthood, they do make their decisions. And hopefully their self-regulatory bucket has been actually filled enough that it's appropriate that they will have consequences to the decisions they make, and they'll be able to live with those consequences. But the young adults, I call this the mentorship and release phase. And I don't know, I have a feeling the generation of our children did not get the mentorship and release phase. If you look at your practice, these are kids that are still at home. They're failing to thrive. They're having a hard time getting work. They can't keep work. They don't drive. They don't have cars, right? And so there's a whole generation now that basically pre this had no water in their bucket. And now we have an entire young adulthood that has they actually are terrified. And that is the huge thing of anxiety and depression we're seeing with this age category, because what happens is they don't feel that they can trust themselves to make the decisions they need to make to be fully functioning adults in society. So they've not been released, and they have not had mentors to help them do that, probably because they did not have a safe place to fall, because a lot of listen, I hear it all the time. My kid will never be able to buy a house. They can never rent a house. They will never be able to afford to buy a car. And I'm like, I don't know if that's true. You haven't even given them any skills to be able to trial some stuff out. How do you know? Let them get a job, let them save some money, because in order for young adults to be regulated, they have to be able to work through some of the challenges of life. And then if they need help, they come back to, say, the parent or their mentor or whoever that is for them. So then, of course, into adulthood, that's all of us. Granted, we are self-regulating humans. Our buckets are relatively full. So I think really, the better word for holding space is what Gabor Mate calls a compassionate witness. I believe that co-regulation into adulthood requires somebody in your life to be your compassionate witness, that you don't necessarily need somebody to talk you off a ledge. Hopefully, maybe you do, and maybe you're still in a requirement of needing a co-regulator often. But we really need a compassionate witness to help validate our experiences, honor the choices we make, even when they don't agree with them. Because at this point, we're making our own choices. We're living our own life. We can do whatever we want. You can change it whenever you want. You can do whatever you want. This is a glorious thing to be in your life. And you have to live with all the consequences. You have enough life experience to know what those are, but that you would have really a compassionate witness around you, that for those small amount of times that you do need somebody to be in your space or in your life, they are there for you without trying to organize something different on behalf of you, because that may not be what you need.